My brother stole my college fund to buy a car, so I bought his mortgage from the bank and foreclosed on his house. I was 17 when I found out Colton had been draining my college savings. Not all at once, he was smarter than that. For 2 years, he'd been forging Mom's signature and making small withdrawals. 500 here, 1,000 there. The withdrawals were always just small enough to avoid triggering bank alerts, but consistent enough to devastate my future. By the time I discovered it, $47,000 was gone. The discovery happened by accident. I was helping Mom organize her financial paperwork for tax season when I noticed the statements for my college account. The balance showed $3,147. It should have been over $50,000. Mom, what happened to my college money? I asked, my hand shaking as I held the statement. Her face went white. That's impossible. We've been depositing your dad's overtime checks every month for years. We called the bank immediately. The representative pulled up the transaction history and read off withdrawal after withdrawal, all authorized by someone with access to the account. The signatures matched Mom's perfectly. Too perfectly. That evening, we confronted Colton. He was in the driveway waxing his brand new lifted truck with custom rims and LED light bars. The truck he'd been bragging about for months, claiming he'd saved up for it through smart budgeting and side hustles. I needed transportation for work, he said when confronted, like that justified stealing my entire future. Besides, college is a scam anyway. You should thank me for saving you from debt. Dad's face turned purple. You stole from your own sister? I borrowed it, Colton corrected, running his hand lovingly over the truck's hood. I'll pay it back eventually, once I get promoted to sales manager. But we all knew he was lying. The truck payments alone were $800 a month. His insurance had doubled because of the modifications. He'd also bought new clothes, expensive tools, and started taking his girlfriend Ava to fancy restaurants every weekend. Eventually isn't good enough, Dad said. You need to return that truck and give her the money back. Colton laughed. I can't return it. I already owe more than it's worth. Besides, the paperwork's already signed. This is legally mine now. The bank account was technically in Mom's name until I turned 18. So legally, there wasn't much I could do. Colton had convinced her to make him a co-signer when he turned 21, claiming he needed it for emergencies. Apparently, wanting a flashy truck qualified as an emergency. I watched my dreams evaporate overnight. State school became community college. My acceptance letter to engineering programs became worthless pieces of paper. While my friends prepared for dorms and campus life, I picked up double shifts at the hardware store, making $12 an hour to rebuild what my brother had stolen. But Colton? He was living his absolute best life. He got promoted at the dealership where Dad had connections, earning commission on top of his base salary. He moved into a luxury apartment complex with a pool and fitness center. His Instagram became a constant stream of updates. Weekend trips, expensive dinners, the truck parked in front of increasingly upscale locations. At family dinners, he'd pat my shoulder with fake sympathy. Don't look so sad, he'd say, cutting into the steak he'd brought to show off. You'll figure something out. Community college isn't that bad. Maybe you can learn a trade. Plumbers make good money. I smiled and nodded, swallowing my rage. But I was planning. For 4 years, I worked like a machine. 60-hour weeks between the hardware store and a weekend cleaning job. Every spare dollar went into a separate savings account that Colton knew nothing about. I lived with Mom and Dad, drove a 15-year-old Honda with a cracked windshield, and wore the same 5 outfits until they literally fell apart. Meanwhile, Colton's lifestyle kept expanding. The truck led to a boat. The apartment became a rental house. He married Ava in a wedding that cost more than my original college fund, complete with a live band and destination bachelor party. They honeymooned in Greece while I worked overtime to afford used textbooks. But I kept saving, and watching, and waiting. 3 years ago, Colton's dealership was bought out by a larger company. His position was eliminated in the restructuring. Ava's part-time retail job couldn't cover their lifestyle, but they refused to downsize. Instead of cutting expenses, they refinanced the house, took out personal loans, and maxed out credit cards to maintain their image. I'd gotten my engineering degree by then, working for a construction company that specialized in foreclosures and distressed properties. I learned exactly how the process worked, how desperate banks became when homeowners fell behind, how properties could be purchased at auction for a fraction of their value. When Colton's mortgage company started calling Mom asking if she'd heard from him, I knew the time had come. The first sign of Colton's financial trouble came during Christmas dinner 2 years ago. He and Ava arrived late, both looking stressed. Usually they showed up with expensive wine and stories about their latest purchases. This time, they brought a bottle from the grocery store and barely spoke during dinner. After the meal, I overheard Colton on the phone in Dad's study, his voice hushed but desperate. I need another extension, he was saying. Just 60 days. The commission check will be bigger after the holidays. When he hung up, I pretended I'd been looking for the bathroom. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool weather. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Fine, he snapped. Just work stuff. But it wasn't work stuff. Over the next few months, the signs became impossible to ignore. The boat disappeared first, upgrading to something better, he claimed, though no replacement ever appeared. Then the luxury apartment became a smaller rental house on the outskirts of town. Ava's designer handbags were replaced with knockoffs, and their dinner dates became fast food runs. The wedding ring Colton had bragged about, 2 months' salary on a custom platinum band, vanished from his finger. When Mom asked about it, he claimed it was being resized. I knew better. I'd learned enough about financial distress to recognize the pattern. Luxury items disappearing, downgrading living situations, defensive explanations for obvious reductions in lifestyle. Colton was drowning, and his pride wouldn't let him admit it. Through my work in construction, I'd met a real estate investor named Rebecca Torres who specialized in distressed properties. She was in her 50s, had built a small empire buying foreclosures and flipping them, and took a mentoring interest in me when she learned about my background. The best opportunities come from other people's disasters, she told me over coffee one afternoon. Banks hate holding on to bad mortgages. They'll sell them to anyone willing to take the risk. How does that work exactly? I asked, though I was already forming a plan. Simple. Bank loans money to homeowner. Homeowner stops paying. Bank forecloses and gets stuck with a property they don't want. Smart investors buy the debt from the bank at a discount, then either collect payments or foreclose themselves. She explained the entire process: how to research distressed properties, how to contact banks holding bad mortgages, how to structure the purchase of debt, and how to navigate the legal requirements for foreclosure. The key is having cash available and understanding the legal process, she said. Most people don't know this is even possible. Banks would rather sell a $200,000 mortgage to an investor for $100,000 than spend 2 years trying to sell the house. I started researching Colton's mortgage immediately. The house was worth approximately $340,000, and he'd bought it 3 years earlier with a $285,000 loan. His payment history would be in the public records once he fell behind, and I had connections through work who could access that information. The waiting was the hardest part. I knew Colton was struggling, but I needed him to fall behind on payments before I could make my move. Every month, I checked the foreclosure filings in our county, looking for his address. It took 8 months. When Colton's name finally appeared on the foreclosure list, I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with something darker. This was really happening. My brother, who had stolen my future and flaunted his stolen lifestyle for years, was about to lose everything he'd built on my money. According to the filing, he was 4 months behind on payments. The outstanding balance was $267,000, and the bank had initiated foreclosure proceedings. In 90 days, the house would be auctioned off to the highest bidder, unless someone purchased the mortgage first. I called Rebecca immediately. I need your help with something, I told her. There's a property I want to acquire, but it's complicated. We met at her office the next morning. I explained the situation, how Colton had stolen my college fund, how he'd used the money to build a lifestyle he couldn't afford, and how I wanted to purchase his mortgage before the foreclosure auction. Rebecca listened without judgment, taking notes on a legal pad. Morally, I understand your motivation, she said when I finished. Legally, everything you're describing is completely above board. The question is whether you're prepared for the emotional fallout. What do you mean? Buying debt from a faceless bank is one thing. Foreclosing on your own brother is another. Are you ready to literally throw your pregnant sister-in-law out of her home? I thought about Ava, who was 6 months pregnant with their first child. She'd been nothing but kind to me, always asking about my studies and celebrating my small victories. She had no idea her comfortable life was built on money stolen from my future. She benefited from what he stole, I said finally. Every nice dinner, every vacation, every designer purse. It was all paid for with my college money. She may not have known it was stolen, but she spent it just the same. Rebecca nodded slowly. Then let's talk numbers. The mortgage company was eager to get the bad debt off their books. Rebecca made the initial contact, representing herself as an investor interested in purchasing distressed mortgages. The bank required proof of funds, a credit check, and a detailed application, but the process was surprisingly straightforward. The outstanding balance was $267,000, including 4 months of missed payments and late fees. The bank agreed to sell the entire mortgage to me for $245,000, a $22,000 discount in exchange for immediate payment and assumption of all collection responsibilities. I had $289,000 in my savings account. 7 years of working 60-hour weeks, living on ramen noodles, and denying myself every luxury while Colton lived like a king. Every sacrifice I'd made, every weekend I'd worked instead of relaxing, every time I'd bought generic groceries while he posted pictures of expensive steaks, it had all led to this moment. I wrote the check on a Wednesday morning in October. By Friday afternoon, I legally owned my brother's mortgage. The first payment was due in 2 weeks. I already knew he couldn't make it. I waited exactly 15 days after the due date before sending the first notice. According to the mortgage terms, I could declare the loan in default after 30 days of non-payment, but I wanted to follow every legal requirement perfectly. The notice was delivered by certified mail on a Tuesday. Mom called me that evening, her voice confused and worried. Colton received some kind of legal notice about his mortgage, she said. He's saying the bank sold his loan to some company called Phoenix Holdings. Have you ever heard of anything like that? Phoenix Holdings was the LLC I'd formed specifically for this purpose. Rebecca had walked me through the entire process, ensuring everything was completely legal and properly documented. Banks sell mortgages all the time, I told her truthfully. It's a normal business practice. But who is Phoenix Holdings? Why would they buy Colton's mortgage? Investment companies buy mortgages as assets, I explained. They collect the monthly payments instead of the bank. It's just business. What I didn't tell her was that I was Phoenix Holdings, that the $245,000 investment was my money, that her eldest son now owed his mortgage payments to his younger sister. Colton called me 3 times that night. I let every call go to voicemail. What the hell is going on? His first message began. Some company I've never heard of is claiming they own my mortgage. This has to be some kind of scam. The second message was angrier. I know you work in construction. You know about this kind of stuff. Call me back and help me figure out what's happening. By the third message, paranoia had set in. This is too much of a coincidence. You're involved in this somehow, aren't you? This is exactly the kind of vindictive thing you'd do. I saved every message. Documentation would be important for what came next. The second notice arrived 3 weeks later. This one informed them that the mortgage was in default and that I was accelerating the full balance. Instead of just the missed payments, they now owed the entire remaining $267,000 immediately. This was a standard provision in most mortgages. But homeowners rarely understand it until they're facing foreclosure. Miss enough payments, and the lender can demand the full amount instead of accepting a payment plan. Colton showed up at my apartment the next day. I watched through the peephole as he pounded on my door, his face red with anger and desperation. "Open up," he shouted. "I know you're in there. We need to talk about this Phoenix Holdings bullshit." Mrs. Rodriguez from across the hall opened her door and peered out nervously. Colton turned on her immediately. "Did you see where my sister went? The blonde girl in 4B? "I don't know who you're talking about," Mrs. Rodriguez said, backing into her apartment. "She's about this tall, drives a silver Honda, works in construction," Colton pressed. "She's my sister, and I need to find her." That's when Mrs. Rodriguez called building security. They escorted Colton from the premises, but not before he'd left an envelope under my door. Inside was a handwritten letter, his desperation evident in the messy scrawl. "I know you're behind Phoenix Holdings. I don't know how you managed it, but I know it's you. You want revenge for the college fund thing? Fine, I get it. But this is going too far. Ava doesn't know about any of that. She thinks this is all some banking error. I'll pay you back everything I took plus interest. Just stop this foreclosure madness before you destroy innocent people." I kept the letter, added it to my growing file of documentation. Everything I took, plus interest. He still didn't understand the scope of what he'd stolen. It wasn't just $47,000. It was 7 years of my life. 7 years of working multiple jobs, living in poverty, and watching him flaunt the lifestyle my money had bought him. How do you calculate interest on stolen dreams? 2 weeks later, Dad called. "Colton told me everything," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "About the college money, about this foreclosure situation, about you being Phoenix Holdings." "Did he tell you about the truck?" I asked. "About the boat, the wedding, the Greece honeymoon? Did he mention how he's been living like a king for 7 years while I worked 3 jobs to afford community college?" Dad was quiet for a long moment. He said he was young and stupid, that he's learned his lesson. "Has he? Because when Mom asked about the missing college money 7 years ago, he said he'd pay it back. When you demanded he return the truck, he said it was impossible. When I asked for an apology, he told me I should thank him for saving me from student loans." "People change," Dad said weakly. "Do they? Because 3 months ago, he was still posting pictures of expensive dinners while claiming he couldn't afford to repay me. The only thing that's changed is that he got caught overspending and now he needs my help. He's your brother. And I was his sister when he forged Mom's signature to steal my future." Dad hung up without saying goodbye. The foreclosure auction was scheduled for a Friday morning in November. State law required the sale to be advertised in the local newspaper for 4 consecutive weeks. I watched every week as the notice appeared, listing Colton and Ava's address among a dozen other properties being sold. I'd driven past their house several times, observing the signs of their deteriorating situation. The lawn was overgrown. They'd probably canceled the landscaping service. Ava's car was gone, likely repossessed. The for sale sign for Colton's truck had been in the driveway for 2 months with no takers. 3 days before the auction, Ava called me. I almost didn't answer, but I was curious what Colton had told her. "Please," she sobbed into the phone. "I don't understand what's happening, but Colton says you can stop this. I'm 8 months pregnant and we have nowhere else to go." "What exactly did Colton tell you about our family history?" I asked. "He said you two had some kind of business disagreement years ago, and now you're trying to steal our house through some investment company. But that can't be right. Your family, business disagreement. That's how he'd characterize stealing my entire college fund. Ask your husband about my college money, Ava. Ask him what he did with $47,000 that was supposed to pay for my education." The line went silent for several seconds. I don't know what you're talking about." "Then you should have that conversation with Colton. Ask him where he got the money for his truck. Ask him how he afforded your wedding. Ask him who paid for your honeymoon in Greece." "You're scaring me," she whispered. "I'm not the one you should be scared of." I hung up and immediately felt guilty. Ava was innocent in all of this. But innocence didn't change the fact that she'd spent 7 years enjoying a lifestyle built on my stolen future. The morning of the auction, I arrived at the courthouse steps at 8:30 a.m. About 40 people had gathered, mostly investors, contractors, and a few desperate homeowners trying to bid on their own properties. I spotted Rebecca in the crowd and nodded. We'd agreed she would attend as backup in case other bidders drove the price too high, but we both knew that was unlikely. The house was in a decent neighborhood, but it needed work, and most investors preferred properties they could flip quickly. The auctioneer started with the least valuable properties and worked his way up. A mobile home went for $15,000. A condemned house sold for $28,000. A small apartment building generated more interest, selling for $180,000. Colton's house was the 7th property on the list. "Next up, we have 1247 Maple Ridge Drive," the auctioneer announced. 3-bedroom, 2-bath colonial on half an acre. Outstanding debt is $267,000. Do I hear an opening bid of $267,000? I raised my paddle immediately. $267,000 to bidder number 18. Do I hear $270,000? A man in a contractor's vest raised his paddle. $270,000. Do I hear $275,000? This continued for several minutes. The bidding reached $295,000 before the other participants started dropping out. The contractor stayed in until $310,000, then shook his head and stepped back. $310,000 going once, going twice. Sold to bidder number 18. I'd won my brother's house for $310,000. In a market where it was worth $340,000, I'd just made a $30,000 profit on paper. But profit wasn't the point. The point was walking up to the clerk, writing a cashier's check for $310,000, and officially becoming the owner of the house where Colton and his pregnant wife lived. The eviction notice was served the next Monday. According to state law, I had to give them 30 days to vacate. The notice was delivered by a sheriff's deputy, who later told me that a heavily pregnant woman answered the door and immediately started crying. She kept asking who Phoenix Holdings was, the deputy said, kept saying there must be some mistake. The man came to the door and started yelling about how this was impossible. That family doesn't do this to family. Family doesn't do this to family. Rich. Coming from someone who'd stolen his sister's college fund. That afternoon, my phone exploded with calls. Mom, Dad, Colton, and several family members I hadn't spoken to in years. Word had spread quickly through our extended family about the foreclosure. I turned off my phone and went for a long drive. When I finally listened to the messages that evening, the progression was predictable. Confusion, anger, disbelief, and finally, desperate bargaining. Mom's message was heartbroken. How could you do this to your own family? Ava's about to have a baby. They have nowhere to go. Dad's was disappointed. I raised you better than this. Whatever anger you're carrying, this isn't the way to handle it. Colton's first message was pure rage. You vindictive bitch. You bought our house just to throw us out. Ava's in the hospital because of the stress you've caused. His second message was panicked. The doctor says the stress could cause premature labor. Do you want to be responsible for hurting an innocent baby? Is your revenge worth more than your nephew's life? His third message was desperate. I'll give you everything. The truck, the boat, my tools, every asset I own. Just let us stay in the house until after the baby's born. Everything he owned was bought with my money. He had nothing to give me that wasn't already mine. I called the hospital to check on Ava. She'd been admitted for monitoring due to high blood pressure, but both she and the baby were stable. The stress wasn't helping, but she wasn't in immediate danger. I felt a moment of doubt. Was I really going to evict a pregnant woman from her home? Was my need for justice worth potentially harming an innocent child? Then I remembered something. 7 years ago, when I was 17 and my entire future had just been stolen, I'd had panic attacks so severe that Mom had taken me to the emergency room. The doctor said the stress was causing heart palpitations, and that I needed to find better coping mechanisms. Had Colton cared about my health then? Had anyone in my family worried about the stress of working 3 jobs while my classmates went to college? Had anyone considered that maybe forcing a teenager to rebuild her entire future from scratch might be psychologically damaging? No. They'd told me to get over it, to forgive and forget, to stop holding grudges. Well, I'd gotten over it, by taking control of my own justice. 2 weeks into the 30-day notice period, I received an unexpected visitor. Uncle Richard, Dad's brother, showed up at my apartment on a Saturday morning. We need to talk, he said when I opened the door. Uncle Richard was the family mediator, the one everyone called when there were disputes to resolve. He'd always been fair with me, never taking sides in family arguments. I know what Colton did to your college fund, he said as we sat in my living room. I knew it at the time, actually. Your dad told me everything. This was news to me. You knew? I told your father he should make Colton sell the truck and repay every penny immediately, but your parents thought it would be too harsh, that it would ruin his credit and his job prospects. So they ruined mine instead. Uncle Richard nodded sadly. They thought you were resilient enough to bounce back. They thought Colton needed more help, because he'd always been irresponsible with money. And now? Now, I think they were wrong. You've built something impressive despite what he did to you. You've got a career, savings, property ownership. Colton's learned nothing. He's still making the same financial mistakes, just on a bigger scale. Then why are you here? Uncle Richard leaned forward. Because there's a pregnant woman caught in the middle of this, and a baby who's going to be born into homelessness. I'm not asking you to forgive Colton. I'm asking you to consider collateral damage. I'd thought about this constantly for 2 weeks. Ava's pregnancy, the timing, the fact that she'd done nothing wrong except marry a thief and spend stolen money. What do you suggest? I asked. Sell them the house. Not at a discount, but at fair market value. They'll have to get a new mortgage, which will be difficult with Colton's credit, but it's possible. It gives them a chance to stay without you appearing weak. And if they can't qualify for a mortgage, then they move out like anyone else would. At least you gave them a fair option. Uncle Richard's proposal had merit. It would demonstrate that this was about justice, not cruelty. If Colton could somehow qualify for a $340,000 mortgage with his destroyed credit and irregular income, he could buy the house from me at market value. If he couldn't, then the eviction would proceed as planned. I agreed to the compromise. The next day, I had my lawyer draft a purchase offer. Colton and Ava had until the end of the 30-day notice period to secure financing and close on a $340,000 purchase. If they couldn't, the eviction would proceed. The offer was delivered by certified mail along with a personal note. This is your opportunity to keep the house through legitimate means. The price is fair market value, the same amount any buyer would pay. If you can qualify for a mortgage, you can stay. If you can't, that's a consequence of your own financial decisions. Colton called within an hour of receiving the offer. $340,000? He screamed into the phone. Are you insane? I bought this house for $285,000 3 years ago, and it's appreciated in value, I replied calmly. $340 is what any buyer would pay in today's market. I can't get a mortgage for that much. My credit is destroyed. Then you should have thought about that before you stopped making payments on your original mortgage. This is family, he shouted. You're supposed to help family, not exploit them. You're right, I said. Family is supposed to help family. You should have remembered that before you stole my college fund. I hung up. The eviction date arrived on a cold December morning. I'd hired a moving company to pack their belongings and place them in storage, which I would pay for the first month. Legally, I had to preserve their property. I didn't attend the actual eviction. I couldn't stomach watching a 9 months pregnant woman being forced from her home, even knowing she'd benefited from my stolen future for years. Instead, I waited until evening, then drove to the house that was now mine. It was empty except for furniture they'd abandoned, pieces too large or worthless to move. The moving company had left everything neatly stacked in the garage. I walked through each room, trying to process what I'd accomplished. The kitchen was gorgeous. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, a wine fridge they'd probably used twice. Colton had installed a gas line for the professional-grade stove, bragging about how he was going to become a gourmet cook. The counter still had water rings from glasses, evidence of their last few days here. The master bedroom felt strange and intimate. This was where they'd slept, planned their future, probably conceived their child. Ava's jewelry box sat abandoned on the dresser, along with a framed photo from their wedding day. The basement had been finished into a home theater with a projection screen and surround sound system. Colton had spent months working on this room, installing acoustics and lighting controls. The leather recliners were expensive, probably financed at the same time as everything else. This was the life they'd built on my stolen dreams. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ava went into labor during the move. She's at St. Mary's Hospital. The baby came 5 weeks early because of the stress. I hope destroying our family was worth it. I stared at the message for a long time, standing in the kitchen of my brother's former house. The baby had come early, a tiny person thrust into the world prematurely because of a conflict she had nothing to do with. I felt a wave of something. Guilt, regret, doubt. Had I gone too far? Was revenge worth potentially harming an innocent child? Then I remembered something else. 7 years ago, during my first semester of community college, I'd collapsed from exhaustion during finals week. Working 60 hours while taking a full course load had pushed my body beyond its limits. I'd ended up in the same hospital, being treated for dehydration and stress-induced heart palpitations. Colton had been in Greece at the time, posting pictures of ancient ruins and 5-star restaurants. He didn't visit me in the hospital. He didn't even know I was there until Mom told him weeks later. His response? She's young. She'll bounce back. Well, now he could bounce back too. I deleted the text and continued my tour of the house. Over the next few months, I renovated the property extensively. New flooring throughout, updated bathrooms, modern lighting fixtures. I wanted to erase every trace of Colton and Ava's presence, to make it truly mine. The work was therapeutic. Every wall I painted over, every fixture I replaced, every improvement I made was a step further away from the pain of what Colton had done to me. This house had been built on my stolen money. Now it was going to be the foundation of my real future. I moved in 6 months later, after the renovations were complete. For the first time in my adult life, I owned something that couldn't be taken away from me. No one could forge signatures or make unauthorized withdrawals. No one could steal my security. The house was mine, paid for with money I'd earned through 7 years of sacrifice and discipline. 3 months after I moved in, I received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a birth announcement. Sophia Marie Thompson, born December 15th, 4 lbs, 6 Oz. Parents, Colton and Ava Thompson. A beautiful baby girl, small but healthy despite her early arrival. The photo showed her in a tiny pink dress, sleeping peacefully in what looked like a hospital bassinet. On the back, someone had written, "Your niece." I studied the photo for a long time. Sophia had Colton's nose but Ava's delicate features. She looked perfect and innocent and completely unaware of the circumstances that had shaped her arrival. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Love for this little person who shared my DNA, sadness that her first weeks of life had been marked by homelessness and family conflict, and underneath it all, a stubborn refusal to feel guilty for the choices that had led us here. Sophia wasn't my responsibility. I hadn't chosen to bring her into the world. Her parents had made a series of decisions, stealing money, living beyond their means, refusing to downsize when their income changed, that had created this situation. I wasn't the villain in this story, no matter how much my family wanted to paint me as one, but I also wasn't completely heartless. I opened a college savings account in Sophia's name and deposited $10,000. Not because I owed her anything, but because she deserved better than the financial irresponsibility her father had demonstrated. When she turned 18, she'd have a foundation to build on. Unlike me, she wouldn't have to worry about someone stealing her future. 6 months later, Mom called to tell me that Colton and Ava had divorced. The stress of losing the house, the premature birth, the financial problems, it was too much for their marriage, she explained. Ava took the baby and moved back with her parents in North Carolina. And Colton? He's living in a studio apartment across town, working at a different dealership, starting over at the bottom. He asked me to tell you that he's sorry. Sorry for what, specifically? Mom was quiet for a moment. He said you'd know what he was sorry for, but I didn't know. Was he sorry for stealing my college fund? Sorry for lying about it for years? Sorry for living lavishly while I worked 3 jobs? Sorry for refusing to make things right until he was forced to? Or was he just sorry that his actions had finally caught up with him? If he wants to apologize, he can do it himself, I told Mom. He's afraid you won't take his call. He's right. Another 6 months passed before I heard from Colton directly. This time, it was a letter delivered to my office. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this. I've had a lot of time to think about what I did to you, and I finally understand how wrong I was. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust and family and stealing your dreams for my own selfish wants. I can't undo what I did, but I want to try to make it right. I've been working with a financial advisor to figure out how much I really owe you. Not just the $47,000 I took, but interest and opportunity cost and everything else you lost because of my choices. The number we came up with is $127,000. That's what your college fund would be worth now if I hadn't touched it, plus the additional income you would have earned with a degree versus working retail jobs. I'm including a cashier's check for that amount. It's everything I have left after paying my debts and child support. I had to sell the truck, my tools, everything. I'm starting over completely. I know money can't fix what I broke between us, but I wanted you to know that I finally understand the real cost of what I did. You didn't just lose college money. You lost years of your life, opportunities, and the trust you had in your family. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I know how badly I screwed up, and I'm sorry. Your brother, Colton. I stared at the check for a long time. $127,000, more than twice what he'd originally stolen, and by his own calculation of what he owed me. For the first time since this whole thing started, his apology felt genuine, not desperate or manipulative, just tired and honest and full of genuine remorse. But it was also 7 years too late. I deposited the check and immediately donated the entire amount to a scholarship fund for students from low-income families. The donation was made in memory of my 17-year-old self, the girl whose dreams had been stolen, who'd had to rebuild her entire future from scratch. Let that money actually help someone go to college, instead of funding someone's selfish choices. I never responded to Colton's letter. 2 years later, I received a wedding invitation. Not from Colton, from our cousin Emma, who was getting married in Vermont. The invitation was addressed to the Thompson family, which technically included both Colton and me. I almost didn't go. Family gatherings had been awkward since the foreclosure, with relatives taking sides and conversations stopping when I entered rooms. But Emma had always been kind to me, and I didn't want to miss her wedding because of ongoing drama with Colton. I arrived at the reception to find Colton sitting alone at a table in the back corner. He looked older, thinner, worn down by years of financial struggle and the collapse of his marriage. He was wearing a suit that looked like it came from a discount store, a far cry from the expensive clothes he used to favor. Our eyes met across the room. He raised his hand in a tentative wave. I nodded acknowledgement, but didn't approach. During the reception, Uncle Richard appeared at my table. He's been asking about you, he said quietly, wondering how you're doing, whether you're happy. I'm doing fine. He looks terrible, doesn't he? I glanced over at Colton, who was picking at his dinner while other family members laughed and celebrated around him. He looks like someone who's facing the consequences of his choices, I said. Do you think you'll ever forgive him? I considered the question. Forgiveness was complicated. It wasn't just about letting go of anger. It was about whether trust could ever be rebuilt, whether relationships could be restored. I don't think about him anymore, I said finally. I used to spend so much energy being angry, planning revenge, making sure he paid for what he did. But that's over now. I've moved on. That's not the same as forgiveness. No, it's not. But it's enough. Uncle Richard nodded and returned to his table. I finished my dinner and left without speaking to Colton. 6 months later, I received another letter. This one was from Ava. I know we haven't spoken since everything happened with the house, but I wanted you to know that Sophia asks about her aunt sometimes. She's 3 now, and she knows she has family she's never met. I've learned a lot about what Colton did to your college fund. I understand now why you did what you did, even though it was hard for me to accept at the time. He stole from you for years and used that money to build our life together. In a way, I was living off stolen money without knowing it. I don't expect you to want a relationship with Sophia, or with me. I just thought you should know that she exists, that she's healthy and happy, and that maybe someday when she's older, you two could meet. There's also something else I wanted to tell you. Colton never blamed you for the divorce. He told me that losing the house and the financial stress was all because of his own bad decisions. He said you were just collecting what he owed you, and that he deserved whatever happened. I thought you should know that he took responsibility, at least with me. If you ever want to meet Sophia, we visit your parents every few months. I know your mom would love to see you there too. Take care, Ava. The letter included recent photos of Sophia, a beautiful toddler with curly hair and bright eyes, playing in what looked like a well-kept backyard. She was clearly loved and cared for, despite the chaos of her early arrival. I studied the photos for a long time. This little girl was my niece, my brother's daughter, part of my family whether I acknowledged her or not. But she was also connected to a chapter of my life that I'd worked hard to close. Seeing her would mean reopening old wounds, confronting questions about family and forgiveness that I wasn't ready to answer. I put the photos in a drawer and didn't respond to Ava's letter. A year later, Mom called with news. Colton had been diagnosed with testicular cancer. Treatable if caught early, but he'd ignored symptoms for months because he couldn't afford regular health care. He's going to start chemotherapy next week, she said. I thought you should know. How bad is it? The doctors think he'll be fine if he responds well to treatment, but it's going to be rough for the next few months. I felt a complex mix of emotion. Relief that his prognosis was good, sadness that anyone had to face cancer, and underneath it all, a stubborn refusal to feel responsible for helping him through it. Do you want his number? Mom asked, in case you want to reach out. No, he's still your brother. And I'm still the sister whose college fund he stole. Mom sighed. When are you going to let this go? I have let it go. That doesn't mean I have to have a relationship with him. 6 months later, Mom called again. Colton's treatment had been successful, but the medical bills had bankrupted him completely. He'd lost his apartment and was living in his car, trying to rebuild his life for the 3rd time. He's not asking for help, she said quickly. I just thought you should know. Why should I know? Because despite everything that happened, he's family. And sometimes family members fall down and need help getting back up. He's an adult, Mom. He can figure it out like I had to when he stole my college fund. That was different. How was it different? When I was 17 and my entire future got destroyed, did anyone offer to help me? Did anyone worry about where I was going to live or how I was going to afford college? Or did everyone just tell me to get over it and move on? Mom was quiet for a long moment. You've become very hard, she said finally. I've become very realistic about what family actually means. The last I heard about Colton was 2 years ago. Uncle Richard mentioned at Christmas that he'd gotten back on his feet, found steady work as a mechanic, and was renting a small apartment across town. He was healthy, employed, and slowly rebuilding his credit. He was also completely alone. The cancer scare had cost him his job at the dealership. The medical bills had destroyed what little financial stability he'd managed to achieve. His relationship with Sophia was limited to supervised visits twice a month, since Ava remained cautious about his ability to provide stable support. According to Uncle Richard, Colton had stopped asking about me, stopped hoping for reconciliation or forgiveness. He'd accepted that his choices had permanently severed our relationship and was focusing on building a new life without his family's support. Part of me felt sad about this. Not sad enough to reach out, but sad nonetheless. We'd grown up together, shared childhood memories, been close before money and selfishness had destroyed our bond. But mostly I felt free. For years after the college fund theft, I'd carried the weight of what Colton had done to me. The betrayal, the lost opportunities, the extra years of struggle. That weight had shaped every decision I made, every sacrifice I endured, every choice about my future. Taking his house had finally lifted that weight. Not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd proven to myself that I could fight back. That I didn't have to be a victim of other people's choices. That I could take control of my own justice when the people who were supposed to protect me failed to do so. Now, at 31, I own my house outright. No mortgage, no debt, no one who can take it away from me. I have a successful career, a healthy savings account, and complete control over my financial future. I've also learned to invest wisely, following Rebecca's guidance to build a portfolio of rental properties. The house I bought from Colton's foreclosure was the foundation of that portfolio. His stolen money became the seed money for my real estate empire. There's a beautiful irony in that. The $47,000 he stole from my college fund has now generated hundreds of thousands in property appreciation and rental income. His short-sighted theft became the catalyst for my long-term wealth building. Sometimes justice takes years to unfold, but it's worth the wait. Last month, I received a graduation announcement. Sophia had finished preschool and would be starting kindergarten in the fall. The photo showed a confident 5-year-old with Colton's mischievous smile and Ava's intelligent eyes. The announcement was accompanied by a note from Ava. I know you probably don't want updates about Sophia, but I thought you'd want to know she's doing well. She's smart and funny and asks a million questions about everything. She knows she has an aunt she's never met, and sometimes she wonders why. I've started a college fund for her. It's not much yet, but I add to it every month. I want her to have opportunities that aren't dependent on anyone else's financial decisions. I hope you're doing well. You deserved better than what happened to you, and I'm glad you fought back. Even though it was hard for us at the time, I understand now that you were just collecting what was owed to you. Take care, Ava. This time I wrote back, thank you for the update. I'm glad Sophia is doing well. She's lucky to have a mother who's thinking about her future and protecting her from financial irresponsibility. I started a college fund for her when she was born. There's enough in it now to cover 4 years at a state university, and it will continue growing until she needs it. She'll have choices that don't depend on anyone else's decisions. Tell her that her aunt is thinking about her, even if we don't know each other yet. Maybe when she's older and can understand complicated family situations, we'll meet. Until then, keep her safe and keep her money safe. With love for Sophia and respect for you. I mailed the letter with copies of the college fund statements. Sophia would have $127,000 waiting for her when she turned 18, exactly what Colton had calculated he owed me, now transformed into his daughter's future. It felt like the right ending to this story. Not forgiveness, exactly, but something more complex. Justice that had evolved into generosity, revenge that had transformed into protection. Colton's theft had set off a chain of events that ultimately led to his daughter having more educational security than I'd ever had. His bad choice had become her opportunity. Sometimes the best revenge is building something better than what was destroyed. Sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal is ensuring it never happens again. And sometimes, justice takes a generation to fully unfold. Sophia will go to college. She'll have choices and opportunities, and the freedom to build whatever life she wants. No one will be able to steal her future or forge signatures or claim her dreams for themselves. That's worth more than any apology Colton could ever give me. That's worth more than any relationship we might have rebuilt. That's worth the 7 years of sacrifice, the foreclosure, the family drama, and the permanent severing of our sibling bond. Some wounds never heal, but sometimes they birth something beautiful. Sometimes the best thing you can do for family is make sure the next generation doesn't repeat the same mistakes. Sometimes letting go means building something better than what you lost. Sophia will have what I never had, absolute security in her educational future. And that's how this story really ends. Not with reconciliation or forgiveness, but with transformation. Pain becoming protection, theft becoming generosity, betrayal becoming the foundation of something unbreakable. Colton stole my college fund to buy a car. I bought his mortgage and foreclosed on his house. His daughter will go to college debt-free. Justice is patient, but it always finds a way.